So I would like to kindly share a proposal I came up with that will hopefully act as a bipartisan way to reduce fossil fuel emissions in the atmosphere, to battle combat and combat climate change for the greater good of humanity. To begin the proposal that I wrote, despite constant awareness being given towards politicians and the general population on the harmful effects of adding fossil fuels to the atmosphere, and immediate and future disastrous effects on our social and economic well-being as a result of it, there has been little action by certain politicians and countries to reduce their fossil fuel emissions. It is suggested by this proposal that in order for there to be immediate action to reduce fossil fuel emissions by politicians and countries not fully on board with taking action against climate change, that a bipartisan compromise should be proposed that will get everyone on board, including those that don't see reducing fossil fuel emissions as a top priority. The bipartisan compromise is intended to get everyone on board by acting as a more business-friendly and bipartisan way of reducing the fossil fuels being added to the atmosphere. It is in the respectful opinion of this proposal that there may be the grim reality of continuing to have little action being taken towards fighting climate change, despite all the hard efforts of trying to get everyone on board, and thus if there is some sort of bipartisan compromise that can be realistically agreed upon by all politicians, at least as of the current state of political divisiveness. This is not to discount or discourage awareness, scientific facts, or research from continuing, as they are very essential and are meant to benefit the greater good of society, and they should certainly be continued to be pursued. The intended audience of this proposal includes but is not limited to the general population of the United States of America and the world, politicians of the United States and the world from all political viewpoints and parties, key global organizations such as the United Nations, political and global leaders from all across the world, and even different business executives and nonprofit leaders from all sections from the United States and the world. It is proposed towards the intended audience of this proposal that the suggested bipartisan compromise written by this proposal, or one similar or inspired by this proposal, is implemented and suggested towards countries and politicians that have not taken enough action to reduce the level of fossil fuels being added to the atmosphere. This suggested bipartisan compromise is listed below in the following points. Point 1 is to have a certain amount of a tax credit given towards businesses that reduce their fossil fuel emissions by a certain amount or by being lower than their competitors' fossil fuel emissions. This could act as a positive incentive for businesses to reduce their fossil fuels and hopefully encourage innovation. To encourage businesses to pursue large innovative projects that would allow them to minimize efforts of fossil fuels into the atmosphere by reimbursing or compensating businesses that choose to pursue these projects. The reimbursements or compensation would act as a positive incentive as well as to make up for the burden of the potential short-term costs of pursuing these projects. Perhaps even awards or loosening of certain regulations on companies that pursue these projects could be intended as well. These large projects could be brainstormed and proposed by different organizations or the government, or even potentially from inside the business itself, with the knowingness of hopefully being able to be reimbursed or compensated by the government by pursuing a large project. The large projects could also be more attractive for businesses by showing them a range of possibilities of how much it can cost or increase revenue for them in the long run. Those calculations can be done by different organizations or the government. So the third and final point is to have a fossil fuel tax that can cover all or at least some of the lost revenue of the government as a result of what is stated in the previous two bullet points. Not only can this help make up for some of the lost revenue as just stated before, but can also potentially encourage certain businesses to not emit such higher levels of fossil fuels into the atmosphere. The level of the fossil fuel tax should be reasonably agreed upon and discussed by the politicians in power from different viewpoints or parties within a country to ensure that it is a compromise that can be successfully passed and implemented into the country's legislation as soon as possible. The bipartisan compromise just stated in the previous points is specifically intended to be attractive not only towards those that see climate change as a dire scientific reality, but also among those that are more fiscally or socially conservative, that may need the business-friendly incentives in order to be willing to pass legislation that would reduce the fossil fuel emissions. So in summary, it is in the opinion of this proposal that likely the only way to quickly lower fossil fuel emissions in the atmosphere, in order to successfully or at least partially fight climate change, is to have bipartisanship within countries that aren't as willing to reduce their fossil fuel levels. In a perfect world, everyone could easily take the facts given to them regarding the current and potential catastrophes regarding climate change and implement policies that would quickly reduce the fossil fuel emissions. However, considering that our current society is very politically divisive, and not all politicians are as willing to make it a high priority to battle climate change, there likely needs to be a bipartisan compromise among politicians so that action can finally be taken to combat climate change. A flexible but detailed suggested bipartisan compromise for countries that aren't already making enough of an effort to battle climate change was given in the previous section of this proposal. It is kindly requested by this proposal that the reader informs others about this proposal and what it proposes, so that it can eventually be read by enough members of the intended audience so that action can finally be taken to fight against climate change. Climate change is scientifically proven to be a fact, and hopefully bipartisanship can be the plan of action that will finally make change happen that can benefit the current and future generations of humanity. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to share with others. And the original proposal can be found on my blog, which is Econ Teen Blog, or EconTeenBlog. And you just Google it and then you can find it. Thank you so much, everyone. And I have confidence in the future of humanity as long as we work together. Thanks.